It happened just 3 minutes ago. In a moment that sent shockwaves across the United Kingdom and beyond, Prince William stepped up to a podium outside Clarence House and uttered a sentence that will be dissected for years to come. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I have spoken to my father, the King. I have asked that Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, be formally and permanently stripped of her royal titles. The air shifted. Journalists looked at one another, unsure if they'd heard him right. Across the crowd, phones went up, cameras clicked, and somewhere, not far from that podium, Meghan Markle was seen wiping tears from her face as her husband, Prince Harry, stood rigid beside her. That alone would have made headlines. But then, in a twist no one saw coming, Harry approached William. Not with words, not with a confrontation, but with a handshake. A long, silent, deliberate gesture. One that said, "We may never agree, but I still remember the brother I once had." The silence between them was louder than the press helicopters circling above. This was not just a family matter anymore. It was a seismic shift inside the British monarchy. One that could ripple for decades. This was William, the future king, making a public stand. Against Meghan. Against what she represents in royal history. And maybe, in some way, against the choices his brother has made since leaving the firm. The timing wasn't random. Nothing in royal circles ever is. Coming just days after Meghan and Harry's appearance at a celebrity-filled charity gala in Los Angeles. The announcement looked and felt like a calculated move. Buckingham Palace had remained quiet throughout the weekend. No statements, no clarifications, no denials. Now we know why. Inside royal institutions, silence isn't absence. It's strategy. And in that silence, something had clearly been decided. Something final. The British public, already exhausted by the drama of the last few years, found itself caught between disbelief and vindication. The woman many saw as a disruptive outsider, some said unfairly, others said rightly, now faced official removal from the only royal label that remained tied to her identity. The weight of this wasn't just ceremonial. The titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex were granted as a symbol of inclusion and unity on the day Meghan married into the monarchy. They represented more than status. They were a signal to the world that the crown was evolving, that tradition could stretch, even if just slightly, to accommodate modern love and diversity. Now, with one public sentence, that signal was being rescinded. But how did we get here? How did a fairy tale wedding end in tears, in political maneuvering, in cold declarations read from press cards? And more importantly, why now? To understand this moment, you need to understand the cracks that have been spreading beneath the surface for years. The first signs came quietly. A tabloid article here, pointed statement there. Then came the interviews, Oprah, Netflix, memoirs, headlines, each one peeling back another layer of royal life, each one bringing new public pressure on the monarchy to respond or reform. Meghan spoke of isolation, racism, mental health struggles. Harry accused the institution of neglect, of silence, of complicity. For some, they became whistleblowers. For others, traitors. Either way, the consequences were mounting. Every public move they made outside royal duties seemed to deepen the divide. Every photo op, every podcast, every book launch felt like a reminder that the old ways were under siege, and the monarchy, famously resistant to change, was starting to hit back. Still, few expected William to be the one to draw the line. For years, he remained the quiet one. While Harry and Meghan told their side to the cameras, William stayed behind palace walls. No interviews, no rebuttals, just carefully worded statements released through Kensington Palace, all echoing the same royal motto: never complain, never explain. But that motto cracked today. William didn't just complain, he demanded action. And the action he asked for was nothing less than royal erasure. The speech was short, just under 5 minutes, but every word was deliberate. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He was calm, controlled, regal, and that, perhaps, made it all the more devastating. He acknowledged the pain of the past. He referenced the need for healing. But then he pivoted firmly and without hesitation to the need for consequences. "We must protect the integrity of the crown," he said. "Titles are not just names. They are responsibilities. They are honors. They must reflect trust." No one needed him to say her name. Everyone knew exactly who he meant. The call to remove Meghan's titles wasn't just symbolic. It was surgical. It sent a message to the public, to the press, and most of all to Meghan and Harry. That forgiveness in this case was selective. That the brotherly bond might heal. But not the bridge Meghan tried to cross. The aftermath was immediate. Royal commentators scrambled to confirm the legality of such a request. Constitutional scholars pulled out dusty precedent cases. Social media exploded. In California, TMZ released footage of Meghan leaving a private estate, flanked by security, visibly emotional, declining to comment. And yet, through all the noise, one image stood above all: Harry's handshake. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't even warm. But it was real. After years of cold shoulders and distance, William and Harry made eye contact and connected hands. It was stiff, tense, charged with history. But it happened. And in that moment, the message became painfully clear. He forgave his brother, but not her. That single detail is what's electrifying the world right now. The handshake is being analyzed frame by frame, discussed by body language experts, spun by headlines. Was it sincere? Was it staged? Was it a beginning? Or a final goodbye? Whatever it was, it confirmed what many had suspected but dared not say aloud. The monarchy might make room for Harry again. But Meghan? She might already be out. And that's where we are now. A kingdom split between tradition and transformation. A royal family struggling to maintain unity in a digital age where every whisper becomes a headline. And a woman, once embraced, now seemingly erased, caught in the crossfire of a centuries-old institution defending its legacy. But the real question isn't just what happened today. It's what happens next. Because if William's statement was the first strike, what comes after could redraw the royal family as we know it. Will King Charles approve the move? Will Harry stand by his wife or step closer to his brother? Will Meghan fight back? Legally, publicly, globally? This isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. And by the time we reach the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment, these 3 minutes, could be remembered as the turning point of the modern monarchy. Not because a title was taken, but because a line was drawn. It didn't begin with a press conference. It didn't begin with a handshake. And it didn't begin with Meghan Markle. To truly understand how today's announcement came to be, how a future king found himself demanding the removal of royal titles from his sister-in-law, we have to go back. Back to a time when the monarchy was not under siege by headlines, streaming deals, or public scandals. A time when the bond between two royal brothers was unbreakable. Princes William and Harry were once the image of brotherhood. After the death of Princess Diana, they leaned on each other, not just for emotional support, but as the only two people on earth who could possibly understand what it meant to grow up in the shadow of one of the most photographed women in history. They were boys made to walk behind their mother's coffin before the world. From that moment, a pact seemed to form between them, silent but sacred. Fast forward 2 decades, and that pact now appears in ruins. But it didn't shatter all at once. Cracked slowly, subtly, with choices that, at first, didn't seem like betrayal. With differences in personality, in priorities, in perception. William, always the more serious, more cautious, more dutiful. Harry, more instinctive, more impulsive, and increasingly resistant to the structures that came with his birthright. When Meghan Markle entered Harry's life, the divergence accelerated. A biracial, divorced American actress, her very identity disrupted centuries of royal tradition. And at first, the institution tried to embrace that disruption. Meghan and Harry's 2018 wedding was hailed as a symbol of modernity. Choirs sang gospel hymns at St. George's Chapel. African-American culture mixed with royal ceremony. The monarchy seemed to be evolving. But evolution, especially in institutions rooted in bloodlines and hierarchy, doesn't come without resistance. The British tabloid press began to turn. Headlines that once praised Meghan's style or charitable work shifted in tone. Words like diva, difficult, and demanding began to surface. Comparisons to Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, became increasingly cruel. Where Kate was glowing, Meghan was grabbing attention. Where Kate cradled her bump, Meghan was accused of being too performative. The coverage wasn't just different. It was relentless, and it didn't go unnoticed. Internally, Meghan reportedly struggled. Stories of her seeking help for mental health concerns circulated after the Oprah interview. The palace, she claimed, refused to intervene or offer adequate support. Harry, protective of her and still traumatized by what he saw as the media's role in his mother's death, began pulling away. The couple's decision to step back from royal duties in 2020 wasn't spontaneous. It had been building. First came the legal battles against the tabloids. Then came the refusal to allow their son, Archie, a royal title. Then came the move to Canada, temporary at first, then to the United States, a continent away from the crown. The palace's response to their departure was characteristically muted. A statement confirming their decision, a formal acknowledgement that they would no longer use their HRH titles, and a note that they would no longer receive public funds. It sounded diplomatic, even amicable, but beneath the surface, tensions boiled. William was reportedly furious, not just at the decision to leave, but at the way it was done. The couple's announcement came without full coordination with the family. Meetings had to be rushed, staff blindsided. It wasn't just personal. It was procedural chaos, something William, ever the institutionalist, couldn't abide. Still, he stayed silent publicly. So did Charles. So did the Queen. Then came the Oprah interview. Meghan spoke of feeling suicidal, of being denied help, of racism inside the institution, including an unnamed royal allegedly questioning the skin tone of her unborn child. Harry accused his family of ignoring his calls, of being trapped by tradition, of lacking empathy. The impact was global. The monarchy had not faced such damning public testimony since the days of Princess Diana. Public sympathy split. Some stood firmly with Meghan and Harry, praising their courage to speak out. Others viewed it as betrayal, the airing of family grievances on a global stage with no path back. But inside the royal walls, the dynamic shifted in more lasting ways. William's position hardened. As the future king, he saw not just his family's image under attack, but the very structure he was born to inherit. The idea that a royal could go on American television, accuse the monarchy of racism, and still retain titles and privileges seemed untenable to him. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was constitutional. It was institutional. The problem, though, was legal nuance. Harry and Meghan had already agreed not to use their HRH titles. But their peerage titles, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, were different. Those were granted by the Queen, not just inherited, and were rooted in legal structures that made removing them far more complicated. Only Parliament or the reigning monarch could initiate such a step. It had never been done in the modern era without extreme scandal. So William waited. He watched, and Meghan and Harry continued to build their life in the U.S. There were deals with Netflix, Spotify, Penguin Random House, documentaries, podcasts, a memoir that sent fresh shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. Page after page, Harry detailed his grievances, his trauma, and his version of events. William, portrayed as cold, temperamental, even physically aggressive in one altercation, reportedly felt blindsided and betrayed. Still, no public response. Until now. It wasn't just the accumulation of slights. It wasn't just personal pain. Insiders suggest that William saw the recent resurgence of Meghan and Harry's public profile as a tipping point. A new documentary, a gala appearance with global influencers, a media push that rebranded the Sussexes as royal-adjacent celebrities, trading on the prestige of the titles they were granted. For William, this was exploitation, a soft form of monetizing monarchy. The handshake, then, becomes more than a personal gesture. It becomes a punctuation mark on years of estrangement. The act of William reaching across the divide to shake his brother's hand, after issuing a public statement about Meghan's titles, carries more than symbolism. It sets the tone for the future. The message is clear. Family ties may bend, but royal duty stands firm. And that duty, in William's eyes, means accountability. The title of Duchess, he seems to be arguing, is not just a birthright extension through marriage. It's a designation of honor, one that must be earned, preserved, and protected. Now that Meghan has openly challenged the institution, not once, not twice, but over a series of public platforms, William sees no choice but to act. What makes this moment extraordinary is not just the decision itself, but the man making it. William, once seen as the more reserved, more diplomatic of the two brothers, has now taken the boldest, most controversial stance. He's pushed beyond the quiet tradition of stoic royal behavior and entered the arena of public reckoning. And in doing so, he has not only redefined his role as heir, he may have just redefined the future of the monarchy itself. No one expected Prince William to speak. Not like this, not publicly, not personally. For years, he had maintained the posture of the silent royal, unshakable, unreadable, unflappable. While Harry spoke on podcasts, on primetime specials, in personal memoirs, William remained on message, on brand, and on script. His silence was strategic. It protected the institution, avoided escalation, and reinforced the royal family's long-standing philosophy: dignity through distance. But that all changed at precisely 10:03 a.m. Outside Clarence House, under overcast skies and in front of a handful of carefully selected press, Prince William stepped up to a podium with a single sheet of paper. His jaw was clenched, his brow locked in tight focus. The tension in his body was visible, not from nerves but from sheer weight. He was about to detonate something irreversible. Behind him, a simple royal crest. No flags, no music, no theatrics, just a prince speaking plainly. "Good morning. I'll keep this brief." He took a breath. In recent months, and indeed in recent years, the integrity of the crown has been tested, publicly, painfully, and at times unfairly. Another breath. I strayed ahead. But I believe in the institution I serve. I believe in its responsibility to the people of this country. And I believe that titles bestowed by the crown must reflect not only honor, but duty, responsibility, trust. This was not palace PR. This wasn't filtered through aides or buried in press releases. This was raw. This was deliberate. Therefore, I have spoken with His Majesty the King, and I have formally requested that the titles of Duchess of Sussex, and all associated privileges, be rescinded from Meghan Markle. No flinching, no qualifiers, just full exposure. A gasp rippled through the gathered reporters. You could hear pens stop scribbling and thumbs pause mid-text. It was the kind of moment where the entire room realizes history is being made, and they're the ones chronicling it in real time. William continued, "This is not a decision taken lightly. It is not a judgment of character, but of conduct. We must set standards. And when those standards are undermined repeatedly, and in ways that harm the public's trust, we must respond." He paused. For effect. For breath. Maybe even for emotion. We owe that to the institution. We owe it to the Queen's legacy. And we owe it to the generations that will follow. And with that, he folded the paper, stepped back, and walked off without taking a single question. It lasted 4 minutes and 42 seconds. But the impact, immediate. Within 10 minutes, global news outlets had the headline: Prince William calls for Meghan's titles to be revoked. Within 30, Buckingham Palace issued a short acknowledgement that the king was reviewing the matter. No confirmation, no denial. Just acknowledgement, which, in royal speak, means the request was real. Across social media, the fallout was seismic. Some praised William for what they called long overdue accountability. Others decried it as cruel, vengeful, or performative. But the split was more than public opinion. It exposed a deeper fracture, not just between individuals, but between visions of royalty itself. What does it mean to be royal in the modern world? Can you be royal and be a media figure? A brand? An activist? An American citizen living outside the system? William's statement forced the question to the forefront. It wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the entire future framework of the monarchy and how far its boundaries can bend before they break. But while the press was still digesting the bombshell, something else happened. Something quieter, but maybe more telling. From the side entrance of Clarence House, Prince Harry appeared. He was wearing a navy suit, his tie slightly loosened, and his face, pale, tired, tense, told a story that no statement could. For a moment there was speculation. Would he respond? Would he defend Meghan? Would he walk past the press and disappear into a waiting car, his silence as sharp as his brother's words? He did none of those things. Instead, he walked directly toward William. Security stiffened, cameras raised. Even the press stopped shouting. The two brothers stood, face to face, for the first time in public since the Queen's funeral. No podium, no palisades, no rehearsed lines. And then Harry extended his hand. The moment stretched longer than it needed to. William looked down, then up, then took the hand. They shook. Firmly, quietly, without words. It was over in seconds. But the symbolism exploded instantly. This wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't warmth. But it was something. A gesture of civility? A signal of acceptance? Or was it simply the acknowledgement of a moment bigger than both of them? One that would define not just the headlines of the day, but the royal narrative for years. The internet lit up. Royal body language experts weighed in. Some called the handshake a peace offering. Others said it was staged for optics. But what no one denied was that it happened, and that it happened in direct proximity to a speech that had publicly condemned Meghan. It created a visual binary that was hard to ignore. William forgave Harry, or at least acknowledged him. But not Meghan. That dynamic would dominate every discussion in the days to follow. And inside the palace, according to insiders, the implications were already being debated. Removing a title isn't just ceremonial. It carries real-world consequences. Legal, financial, diplomatic. The title Duchess of Sussex is woven into documents, charities, historical registries. Stripping it requires not just consent from the crown, but a legal mechanism, likely through the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, originally designed for nobles who supported enemy forces during wartime. Invoking it for Meghan would be unprecedented. And yet, William's statement made clear that he was willing to go there. The palace issued no timeline. No decision was made public. But in back channels, discussions began. Advisors, legal experts, constitutional scholars, all brought in to assess feasibility, fallout, and public perception. And Meghan? No statement. No post, no appearance. But in California, a brief video surfaced hours later. TMZ footage. Grainy. Meghan exiting a private residence, escorted by security. She looks shaken, lips tight, eyes red. When asked for a comment, she gives none. She steps into the car and drives off. In a world where silence is rare, especially from public figures, Meghan's lack of response was its own statement. Maybe strategic, maybe emotional, maybe both. But one thing was clear. The narrative had shifted. This wasn't a war of words anymore. It was a war of legitimacy. The titles, once thought to be symbolic, had become weapons. And William had just fired the first shot. Let me know when to continue with Part 3. Analysis, expert reactions, and public opinion. The monarchy doesn't move fast. When it does, every step is calculated, calibrated, and choreographed. But what happened on that morning? William's blunt speech, the handshake, Meghan's visible emotional distress, shattered the usual tempo of royal affairs. In less than 5 minutes, centuries of etiquette were bypassed. And when the dust began to settle, the world scrambled to understand what it all meant. Was this a tactical move? Power play? A brother trying to protect the crown? Or a man fed up with what he saw as repeated attacks on the institution he was born to lead? Whatever the motivation, analysts, former palace insiders, royal biographers, and public opinion researchers all agreed on one thing. The consequences were now global. The first voices to weigh in were the royal commentators. Some with decades of palace access. Others with insider sources deep within the firm. They'd seen their share of scandals. Charles and Diana's divorce, Prince Andrew's downfall, the Megxit drama. But this, they said, felt different. It was the cleanest public cut I've ever witnessed, said Jonelle Havers, a veteran royal correspondent who has covered 5 royal administrations. William didn't hedge. He didn't soften. He went straight for the core issue, titles which are the lifeblood of monarchy. You don't go after that unless you've reached a point of no return. Others echoed that sentiment. Christopher Milne, author of 2 best-selling books on the royal family, framed it this way. What William did was revolutionary by royal standards. We're so used to seeing the monarchy drip-feed decisions through ambiguous statements and background briefings. This was surgical. He's not just positioning himself as a future king. He's behaving like one. But not everyone applauded. A small but vocal contingent of historians and former aides saw the announcement as dangerously impulsive. A public airing of internal issues that should have been resolved privately. According to one unnamed former palace press secretary, you can't reverse something like this. Once a senior royal suggests that titles should be removed, especially on such personal terms, you create a precedent. And not a good one. Beyond the British press, international media responded with urgency. American outlets were first to push the personal angle. Was this an attack on Meghan? On her heritage? Her race? Her politics? The tabloids lit up with headlines like, Royal Vendetta, Meghan punished for speaking her truth, and Forgiven brother, forgotten wife. On conservative networks, the tone was different. Pundits debated the boundaries of royal conduct. She left, one anchor argued. She rejected the institution. You don't get to keep the titles of a kingdom you're no longer loyal to. In the middle of all this noise, experts in constitutional law stepped forward to unpack what most of the public was just beginning to realize. Stripping a duchess of her peerage is not a button the king can press on a whim. It's a legal and parliamentary affair, one with historical weight. Professor Elaine Granger of King's College London explained, the only modern legal mechanism for removing a peerage is the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, which was originally passed to target nobles who supported Nazi Germany or the Austro-Hungarian Empire during World War I. To apply it to Meghan Markle would be unprecedented and likely controversial. That said, the Crown, in theory, has leeway to renegotiate titles through letters patent. But doing so would ignite a public firestorm. And public reaction was, indeed, a firestorm. Polls began circulating within 24 hours of the announcement. In the UK, an initial YouGov poll showed 53% of respondents supported removing Meghan's title, while 29% opposed, and 18% were undecided or indifferent. That slim majority underscored a reality the palace knows well. The country is divided on the Sussexes. Age demographics told a deeper story. Among older Britons, especially those over 55, support for William's decision was significantly higher, nearly 70%. But among the 18 to 34 demographic, support plummeted to 36%, with most saying they believed the move was too harsh or unnecessary. Across the Atlantic, the response was even more fragmented. In the U.S., Meghan and Harry still enjoy a loyal fan base. Many Americans see them as victims of a cold institution. Social media accounts, particularly on TikTok and Instagram, flooded with clips of Meghan's past speeches, quotes from the Oprah interview, and footage from the couple's charitable appearances. The narrative emerging in those circles was clear. She was being punished for telling the truth. It feels like retaliation, said Eva Montenegro, a cultural critic writing for Slate. William isn't just asking for a title to be removed. He's erasing her from the institution that she was once embraced into. The message is, you never belonged here to begin with. And that's a powerful, dangerous message. But there were counterarguments, too. Columnists like Peter Godfrey of The Telegraph argued that this wasn't about personal vengeance. It was about precedent. If the monarchy is to survive the 21st century, it must draw clear lines. A duchess cannot be a brand ambassador for Spotify on Monday and a royal on Tuesday. The distinction must be absolute. Meanwhile, within academic and socio-political circles, a more nuanced conversation began taking shape. Meghan had become a lightning rod, not just for royal protocol, but for everything tied to it: race, gender, class, and colonial legacies. Sociologist Nina Patel from Oxford University pointed to the cultural significance of the act. By removing Meghan's title, the crown may be perceived, rightly or wrongly, as rejecting the first woman of color to ever join the British royal family in a meaningful way. That perception cannot be separated from the act itself. In forums and panels, experts debated questions that had no easy answers. Can a monarchy adapt without compromising its traditions? Should titles be stripped for behavior deemed disloyal? And more provocatively, who gets to decide what counts as loyalty? But if the experts had conflicting answers, the public had no such restraint. On the streets of London, reporters captured real-time reactions. "She was never one of us," said an older woman standing outside Windsor Castle. "It was a fantasy. She wanted the crown without the crown's rules. She's being scapegoated," argued a university student in Manchester. "She tried to change things, and they punished her for it." In Los Angeles, the tone was even sharper. "This is disgusting," said one bystander outside the Montecito area, where Meghan and Harry live. "She gave up everything to be part of that family, and now they're throwing her out like trash. What kind of family does that?" Online, hashtags trended within hours. Hashtag I stand with Meghan. Hashtag protect the crown. Hashtag Meghan deserves better. Hashtag no more Duchess. Some trended organically. Others, likely amplified by influencer communities and political interests. But all of them painted a clear picture. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a cultural battleground. Meghan had become, once again, a symbol. And symbols, once weaponized, are rarely returned to neutrality. Behind the ornate gates of Buckingham Palace, where the public rarely sees past the facades, something has been building for a long time. Not just tension, strategy. The announcement made by Prince William wasn't a last-minute decision. It wasn't a burst of emotion. It was, according to multiple sources familiar with the inner workings of the firm, the end result of months, if not years, of conversations, frustration, and quiet planning. Everything royal is layered. Before any action is taken publicly, it is pre-approved, rehearsed, filtered through legal counsel, political advisors, and media handlers. That's how the monarchy has survived centuries of revolution, war, scandal, and technological change. But this, a public statement from the future king about stripping a royal title from a living family member, broke protocol in ways that insiders are still processing. Multiple palace aides have since spoken off the record, with one stating, "This has been brewing since early this year. The press has only seen the tip of the iceberg. What you witnessed wasn't William going rogue. It was the final move in a coordinated internal campaign to isolate Meghan from the monarchy permanently." One key trigger, they say, was Meghan and Harry's recent media rebranding. Their latest joint project, a lifestyle brand rumored to be worth tens of millions, used the Sussex name prominently in pre-launch communications. Even though the couple had stepped back from royal duties, the use of the Duchess of Sussex label in a commercial setting was viewed by palace officials as deeply inappropriate. "It's one thing to use your story to build a platform," said the aide. "It's another to use a royal title as a marketing asset." That crossed a line. And William made it clear internally that the line wouldn't move. Behind the scenes, pressure had been building from multiple directions. Senior courtiers were reportedly unhappy with how often the Sussexes appeared to invoke their titles while publicly criticizing the crown. Members of Parliament were privately expressing concern that the monarchy looked indecisive, tolerating behavior that would have been unthinkable just a generation ago. Even King Charles, who had long taken a more conciliatory tone with Harry and Meghan, was said to be increasingly concerned about the institution's long-term credibility. And so, in late summer, a strategy was quietly approved. First, a renewed legal review of the mechanisms required to remove peerage titles. Not just honorary styling like Her Royal Highness, which had already been suspended, but the legal title of Duke and Duchess. This process, according to insiders, involved consultation with the Privy Council, the Lord Chamberlain, and senior constitutional advisors. Then came the timing. A senior communications strategist within the royal household reportedly advised William to wait for a moment when the Sussexes were making headlines again, to ensure maximum contrast. That moment came with their appearance at a high-profile gala in California. Meghan was photographed wearing a gold gown, beaming, surrounded by Hollywood elites. The palace saw it as the perfect foil. That was the visual, said one insider. While the royal family was hosting quiet charity events in the UK, Meghan was on another red carpet. The symbolism was sharp, too sharp to ignore. Internally, aides crafted the language of William's address weeks before it was delivered. It was reviewed by Palace Legal Counsel. Adjustments were made to avoid outright legal jeopardy, but the message was always going to be crystal clear. What caught even some palace staff by surprise was the handshake. According to several sources, there was no plan for Harry to appear that morning. The brothers hadn't spoken in person in months. But something changed behind the scenes the night before. Harry, informed in advance of William's intended announcement, made a decision to fly to London. No cameras captured his arrival. There was no motorcade. He reportedly traveled on a private overnight flight, under an alias, and arrived quietly at a private entrance near Clarence House just hours before the press conference. What they said to each other before that handshake, if anything, is still unknown. Some speculate they didn't speak at all. Others say they exchanged a brief and highly controlled conversation through intermediaries the night before. What is known is that the handshake wasn't part of the palace's scheduled run of show. It wasn't planned, said a senior aide, and that's why it worked. It was human, real, and deeply complicated. Within the royal household, reactions to the handshake were mixed. Some saw it as a moment of potential healing. Others feared it diluted the clarity of William's message, that Meghan was the problem, not Harry. Which brings us to Meghan. Since the announcement, her silence has been interpreted in different ways. Some believe it was advised by her legal team. Others think it reflects personal devastation. A source close to her inner circle, speaking anonymously, said Meghan was blindsided. She knew things were tense. But this public call to erase her title? She's furious and hurt, but also calculating her next move. According to this source, Meghan has already been in contact with legal counsel in both the UK and US to assess whether the removal of her title could be challenged. It's not clear what legal grounds exist to prevent it, if any. Titles are granted and revoked at the discretion of the monarch. And even if Parliament were required to weigh in, it's unlikely any court would view it as a matter of civil rights. Still, the potential for a public rebuttal is real. Meghan will not let this go unanswered, said the source. Not because she wants the title back, but because of what the removal implies. It's about dignity, reputation, legacy. You don't just let that happen without defending yourself. Inside Montecito, Meghan's media advisors have reportedly been in near-constant meetings. The question isn't just if she will respond, it's how. Will it be an exclusive interview? A carefully crafted op-ed? A media blitz? Or will she do what she hasn't done since the Netflix docuseries? Sit in front of a camera and speak directly to the world? One of her longtime collaborators, who worked with her on previous projects, said this: "If Meghan speaks, she'll do it on her terms. And when she does, it'll be precise, polished, and devastating." Meanwhile, the palace braces. They know that any pushback from Meghan could reignite a media frenzy, one that puts them back in the defensive posture they tried so hard to escape. But they also believe they've made their position clear. William's statement, they argue, wasn't just for now. It was a line drawn in permanent ink. And yet, the situation remains deeply unstable. Royal officials are monitoring Meghan's next moves with quiet intensity. Behind closed doors, contingency plans are being drafted for how to respond to various forms of public reaction. ranging from full silence to an explosive counternarrative. What happens next may depend on one person more than anyone else. King Charles. His silence so far has been interpreted in two ways: as royal restraint, allowing his son to speak freely as the heir, or as uncertainty, a signal that he hasn't yet decided whether to follow through with the request. Insiders say the king is in a difficult position. He has long hoped to repair his relationship with Harry, and by extension, keep the possibility of reconciliation with Meghan alive. But William's public move has forced his hand. If the king doesn't act, one palace aide explained, it undermines William. If he does act, it severs ties with Meghan completely. It's a no-win scenario, but the decision must come. And when it does, it will be one of the most consequential royal actions in recent memory. The decision has been made, but the story is far from over. Royal announcements don't wrap things up, they set things in motion. What the world witnessed in Prince William's 4-minute address was not an end. It was the start of a new and far more volatile phase of this ongoing saga. And now, the question looming over the monarchy is simple but ominous. Was this closure or the opening shot of a longer, more public war? To begin answering that, you have to understand how monarchy functions in moments of conflict. For centuries, the British royal family has relied on a mixture of silence, symbolism, and slow-motion diplomacy to resolve its problems. Rarely has it resorted to direct confrontation. Even rarer has it involved the public in its disciplinary decisions. That's what makes William's call to revoke Meghan's titles such a rupture. He broke protocol. He pierced the family's wall of silence. And in doing so, he not only changed the trajectory of his own relationship with his brother, he altered the crown's way of handling internal dissent. So what happens now? First, we must look at the likely paths ahead for Harry and Meghan. It's almost certain they'll respond, but how that response unfolds will define whether this moment becomes a final fracture or the beginning of détente. There are a few options on the table. In this scenario, Meghan and Harry say nothing. They let the announcement stand and quietly rebrand themselves without royal titles. It would be a loss reputationally in some circles, but it would also allow them to pivot into new territory, public figures unshackled from a royal institution they've repeatedly criticized. They could emphasize their charitable work, their media endeavors, and their identity as parents and global influencers. There's power in walking away, but there's also risk. Silence could be perceived as weakness or tacit admission. And Meghan, in particular, has never been one to let others define the narrative around her. More likely is a well-planned media response, a sit-down interview, a documentary segment, or an op-ed where Meghan addresses the title issue directly. It wouldn't be angry. It wouldn't be reckless. It would be measured, calm, and focused on bigger themes: race, tradition, institutional rigidity. Meghan wouldn't just defend herself. She'd use the moment to reignite the broader conversation about what the monarchy represents and who it excludes. This path could be explosive, but it could also solidify her global base, especially among younger, progressive audiences disillusioned with the monarchy. Least likely, but not impossible, is legal resistance. Meghan could explore whether the title removal violates prior agreements made during the Sussexes' original royal exit. Or, more provocatively, she could appeal to public figures in the UK Parliament who oppose monarchy altogether, framing the removal as part of a deeper systemic problem. It would be bold, and it would almost certainly draw fierce backlash from the establishment. But it would signal that she's not going down quietly. Meanwhile, within the palace, preparations are underway for all of these possibilities. The communications teams have prepared responses. Legal advisors are on standby. Public relations firms have modeled different scenarios. Because the institution understands one thing better than anyone. This is not just about Meghan. It's about precedent, which leads us to the past. The British monarchy has stripped titles before, but never like this. Never while the person in question remained in the public eye. Never while the entire world was watching every frame of the story unfold on TikTok, YouTube, and 24-hour news cycles. In 1936, King Edward VIII abdicated the throne to Mary Wallace Simpson, an American divorcee. His title changed. His influence disappeared. But he lived the rest of his life abroad, mostly out of public interest. In 1996, after her divorce from Prince Charles, Princess Diana lost the style of Her Royal Highness, though she remained the Princess of Wales. That decision, deeply controversial, was made quietly, and with the late Queen's reluctant approval. Prince Andrew, accused of sexual misconduct, was stripped of military affiliations and royal patronages in 2022. But that was done under public pressure and amid legal settlements. His title, Duke of York, remains technically intact. Meghan's case is different. She's not accused of crime. She's not divorced. She's not out of the spotlight. And yet, she is being targeted for something arguably more threatening to the monarchy. A narrative. The narrative that the royal family is outdated, that it is racist, that it is emotionally hollow, that it punished those who dared to modernize it. William's speech didn't just attempt to sever Meghan's title. It aimed to sever that narrative from the institution itself. But can it? The public may not be so easily convinced. Especially since the image of William shaking hands with Harry while calling for Meghan's removal has created a moral dilemma for many observers. The gesture was powerful, but also loaded, posed a quiet question. If forgiveness was possible for one, why not the other? Insiders say the palace is aware of this contradiction, but they defend the move, pointing out that Harry was born royal. Meghan was not. Harry can return to royal life without conditions. Meghan cannot, and some believe that distinction matters. But public perception may not follow those lines. Many see the move as fundamentally unequal. One brother gets an olive branch. The other's wife gets a closed door. If the monarchy hopes to survive the social media age, it may need to realize that optics now shape legacies as much as law. And right now, the optics aren't subtle. Still, inside the palace, the calculus remains largely institutional. The real question isn't whether Meghan deserves her title. It's whether the monarchy can afford for her to keep it. Whether her continued association with the Sussex name undermines the crown's authority. For William, the answer is clearly no. For Charles, it may be yes for now. But that tension is widening. And in the long term, the monarchy cannot survive two visions of the future. One that includes Meghan, and one that erases her. 3 minutes. That's how long it took for everything to change. 3 minutes to speak words that can't be unsaid. 3 minutes to draw a line that no one may be able to cross again. 3 minutes for a prince to make a statement, not just about his sister-in-law, but about the direction he believes the monarchy must take. When Prince William asked King Charles to remove Meghan Markle's titles, it was more than a personal decision. It was a moment that signaled the crown's intention to define its own future, by choosing what it allows, what it forgives, and what it cannot tolerate. In those 3 minutes, the world didn't just hear a statement. It watched a transformation. William was no longer simply the heir to the throne. He became a gatekeeper, a man prepared to act, not just endure. And in doing so, he redefined what leadership inside the monarchy might look like in the years ahead. But what was gained, and what was lost? For some, it was justice, a long overdue correction. The removal of a title from someone they believe walked away from responsibility and used her royal status to elevate her own brand. For others, it was cruelty masked as duty. A final rejection of a woman who tried to modernize an ancient institution and paid the price for breaking unspoken rules she was never fully allowed to learn. There are no clean sides in this story. No perfect heroes. No absolute villains. There is only fallout. Meghan Markle, once a symbol of hope for a modern monarchy, now finds herself on the outside of a system she once tried to reform from within. Her silence since the announcement speaks volumes, not because she's afraid to respond, but because whatever response she gives will be scrutinized, dissected, weaponized. And what of Prince Harry? His silence too has been deafening, except for that handshake. That brief, loaded gesture. The moment he reached out to the brother he once called his arch-nemesis in print, and met him not with defiance, but with contact. We don't know what that handshake means. Not yet. Could be a start. Or it could be an end. Maybe it was forgiveness. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was resignation. But whatever it was, it told us something that words couldn't. That families, even royal ones, are complicated. That pain doesn't always fade with time. That sometimes, the ones who hurt us most are also the ones we can't stop hoping to reconcile with. But behind the emotion, there is the cold machinery of monarchy. The titles, the documents, the symbols, the history. If the king follows through, Meghan Markle will no longer be the Duchess of Sussex. Her name will change in public records, on ceremonial documents, and in history books. The title will become a past tense, something she held, but no longer holds. And what's left after that? Her story, her version of events, her voice. That voice may rise again. It may come through an interview, a memoir, a carefully crafted message. Or it may never come at all. But the world will be listening either way. And the monarchy? It will continue. It always does. The crown isn't a person. It's an institution. It absorbs scandals, survives revolutions, outlasts public opinion. But it also evolves slowly, reluctantly, often painfully. This moment will be studied by historians. It will be debated by pundits. It will be remembered by those who saw it unfold live. Because it wasn't just about a title. It was about identity, power, belonging, and the cost of challenging tradition. So where does that leave us? Somewhere in the middle of history and emotion. Somewhere between duty and damage. Somewhere between a royal family trying to protect its legacy, and a woman who believed she could be part of it. And maybe that's what makes this moment so difficult to process. It's not clean. It's not finished. It's not a fairy tale. And it's not a tragedy. It's something messy, something real. It's a story about people. People with power, with flaws, with heartbreak, and with decisions that echo far beyond palace walls. As the dust begins to settle, we're left with one lingering question. Was this the day the monarchy reclaimed its identity, or the day it confirmed it could never change? And just like that, the world is watching again. If you've made it this far, you now understand the stakes. Not just the headlines, not just the handshake, but the story behind the silence, and the cost of speaking out. If you have thoughts, questions, or strong feelings about what happened, let us know in the comments. Was the title removal justified? Should the monarchy have handled things differently? Where do you stand? Subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns of the stories shaping our world. The ones that happen behind the scenes, beneath the surface, and beyond the headlines. Because what happens next might be even bigger than what just happened. Meghan William royal drama. It happened just 3 minutes ago. In a moment that sent shockwaves across the United Kingdom and beyond, Prince William stepped up to a podium outside Clarence House and uttered a sentence that will be dissected for years to come. I have spoken to my father, the king. I have asked that Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, be formally and permanently stripped of her royal titles. The air shifted. Journalists looked at one another, unsure if they'd heard him right. Across the crowd, phones went up, cameras clicked, and somewhere, not far from that podium, Meghan Markle was seen wiping tears from her face as her husband, Prince Harry, stood rigid beside her. That alone would have made headlines. But then, in a twist no one saw coming, Harry approached William. Not with words, not with a confrontation, but with a handshake. A long, silent, deliberate gesture. One that said, "We may never agree, but I still remember the brother I once had." The silence between them was louder than the press helicopters circling above. This was not just a family matter anymore. It was a seismic shift inside the British monarchy. One that could ripple for decades. This was William, the future king, making a public stand. Against Meghan. Against what she represents in royal history. And maybe, in some way, against the choices his brother has made since leaving the firm. The timing wasn't random. Nothing in royal circles ever is. Coming just days after Meghan and Harry's appearance at a celebrity-filled charity gala in Los Angeles. The announcement looked and felt like a calculated move. Buckingham Palace had remained quiet throughout the weekend. No statements. No clarifications. No denials. Now, we know why. Inside royal institutions, silence isn't absence. It's strategy. And in that silence, something had clearly been decided. Something final. The British public, already exhausted by the drama of the last few years, found itself caught between disbelief and vindication. The woman many saw as a disruptive outsider, some said unfairly, others said rightly, now faced official removal from the only royal label that remained tied to her identity. The weight of this wasn't just ceremonial. The titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex were granted as a symbol of inclusion and unity on the day Meghan married into the monarchy. They represented more than status. They were a signal to the world that the crown was evolving, that tradition could stretch, even if just slightly, to accommodate modern love and diversity. Now, with one public sentence, that signal was being rescinded. But how did we get here? How did a fairy tale wedding end in tears, in political maneuvering, in cold declarations read from press cards? And more importantly, why now? To understand this moment, you need to understand the cracks that have been spreading beneath the surface for years. 3 minutes. That's how long it took for everything to change. 3 minutes to speak words that can't be unsaid. 3 minutes to draw a line that no one may be able to cross again. 3 minutes for a prince to make a statement, not just about his sister-in-law, but about the direction he believes the monarchy must take. When Prince William asked King Charles to remove Meghan Markle's titles, it was more than a personal decision. It was a moment that signaled the crown's intention to define its own future. By choosing what it allows, what it forgives, and what it cannot tolerate. Because what happens next might be even bigger than what just happened.